Good morning and welcome to the Swift Current Museum. As we begin today, and in the spirit of respect and reconciliation, we acknowledge that we are gathered here on Treaty 4 territory, the ancestral land of the Cree, Anishinaabeg, Dakota, Nakota, and Lakota nations, and the home of the Métis people. My name is Melissa Shaw, and I am the General Manager of Cultural and Aquatic Services. A few housekeeping items: there are treats and refreshments. Please help yourselves. And washrooms are located just down the hallway beside our temporary gallery. Thank you all for braving the first snowfall and ice of the year as we attend this important celebration and take time to show our respect and honor these 10 veterans. The Veterans Banner program started in 2016, and between then and today, we have seen 59 banners honoring veterans by their family and the community. Following today's ceremony, these 10 new banners will be hung in Memorial Park around the cenotaph that was constructed in 1927 to honor the Swift Current's 209th Battalion Infantry from World War I. As the years have passed, the cenotaph has been dedicated to the veterans of subsequent wars and service to Canada. At this time, I would like to call His Worship Mayor Al Bridle to bring greetings on behalf of the city.
Good morning, and thank you for braving this slippery day. I couldn't believe it. I was shoveling that snow this morning. I thought it was just a little bit of snow, and I got out there and it's heavy. And my old back, I didn't want to throw it out, so I just did the sidewalk and somewhere for the postman to walk. So hopefully that's enough for today. At any rate, it's my pleasure to be here today and bring greetings on behalf of both City Council and City Administration for another unveiling of the Veterans Banner Program, with 10 new additions this year. The Swift Current Museum pays tribute to our local veterans and active service members through this initiative. As an ongoing effort, it leaves a legacy that ensures future generations can become educated about and deepen their respect for these brave contributions these men have made. When we attend Remembrance Day ceremonies, it's quite something to look up at the lampposts in Memorial Park with these veterans' banners displayed. It really hits home that the conflicts in this world, both past and present, affect all of us. And we're very grateful for the sacrifices made by our veterans. In an age where everything is digital and at the click of a button, some people are too rushed and impatient to look back at history, but it's so important to have tangible reminders. We need to continually and intentionally remember. It's not too much to ask. It's a fraction of the honor due to those who have unselfishly protected us and preserved our way of life. I'd like to commend the museum for their commitment to this project and express my thanks to the organizers of this event today. Thank you as well to all of you for coming out this morning on such a blustery morning. I'll now turn things back over to our General Manager, Melissa Shaw. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Your Worship, for your kind words. It is now my distinct honor to introduce the 10 veterans that we are here to honor today. We will go through them in alphabetical order. George Acaster. George Wilbur Acaster was born on September 11th, 1888 in Ontario. George served with the Canadian Infantry Saskatchewan Regime in the 28th Battalion of World War I. He was killed in the Battle of Somme on September 15th, 1916, only 4 days after his 28th birthday in France. He is buried in the Contray British Cemetery in Somme, France. Daniel Lawrence Geisler, born December 27th, 1918, in Shackleton, Saskatchewan, to Jacob and Elizabeth. He married May on November 23rd, 1957, in Abbey, Saskatchewan. Daniel served in the Canadian Army during World War II with the Regina Rifles and was a member of the Regina Band of the 1st Battalion King's Own Rifle of Canada. In Daniel's later years, he became a resident of the Palliser Regional Care Centre and with Alzheimer's disease and passed away on October 26, 1995. David George Gleckler. David was born in Swift Current, Saskatchewan, and his parents were David and Anna Gleckler. He took all of his schooling in Swift Current at Elmwood School and W.A. Beatty Collegiate. He joined the Armed Forces in 1939. David went overseas on June 3, 1940. He served overseas in Europe for 5.5 years. Dave and his battalion were the first men to go to places where they would set up camp. They laid the wire in the camp so they could have communications with the rest of the brigades. David was in the United Kingdom, Mediterranean, and continental Europe. Dave was awarded 5 medals during his stint overseas. Dave was discharged on October 6, 1944, as a result of demobilization, and the war was over. When Dave returned to Canada, he met and married Ruth, and they married on April 23, 1949. When Dave came home to Swift Current, he was hired by the City of Swift Current Light and Power, and he worked for the City of Swift Current Light and Power until he retired in March of 1987. His job classification at that time was Assistant Superintendent of the City of Swift Current Light and Power. Dave passed away in Swift Current on May 9, 1996, and was a member of the Royal Canadian Legion for many years. Dave enjoyed fishing and playing darts with his friends at the Legion. He went to many dart tournaments all over Saskatchewan. Dave is survived by his Ruth wife, his 7 children, and 13 grandchildren. Albert Douglas James. Albert was born to Ralph and Maggie James on October 28, 1920, in Nesbitt, Manitoba. Growing up on the family farm, he took his education at Fox Valley and Waldeck School. At the age of 19, he joined the Air Forces as an aeromechanic. Albert took training in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. He went to St. Thomas, Ontario, and then became a bombing and gunning depot in Mossbank, Saskatchewan. After a year, he was sent to Bella, British Columbia. There, he was a flight engineer on the PBY, searching for Japanese submarines and incendiary balloons in the Pacific Ocean. He assisted with escorting American ships to Alaska. One day, the plane lost all its cowling and landed in the ocean, and they had to wait for new parts. That wasn't exciting enough for him, so he decided to become a pilot. He took his training at number 7 SPT-5 McLeod, Alberta, and received his wings. He was stationed at Portage-la Prairie in Edmonton, and in 1945 he left the Air Force and went into the reserves. He rejoined the Air Force in 1952 and became a test pilot in Edmonton. Flight Lieutenant James took early retirement and joined the Federal Department of Transportation as an airways accident investigator. His last position was in Ottawa. Albert was married and had 5 children and passed away on March 3, 2006 in Ottawa, Ontario. Cyril John James. Cyril was born to Ralph and Maggie James on September 6, 1916, at their farm near Highfield District. He attended Fox Valley and Waldeck schools. When he finished his grade 12, there were no jobs near his home, so he went to Port Arthur to work in the woods. In 1939, he worked near Montreal. In June of 1940, Cyril joined the Canadian Active Service Force in Montreal. In July, he was sent to 6681 Field, BTY, with the Royal Canadian Artillery in Petawawa, Ontario. In July 1941, he left Dilbert, Nova Scotia for Aldershot, England, with the 14 Field Regime. When Europe was invaded, Lieutenant Sergeant James landed in Bay de Sur, France, and was a qualified signaler laying telephone lines. He was taken prisoner for a day by the Germans. He wrote the account of his capture in the history book of the 14th Field Regiment. He received the Canadian Volunteer Service Medal and clasp. When the war ended in May of 1945, Cyril had spent 14 months in Canada and 4 years and 5 months in the UK and Europe as a soldier. Cyril arrived back in Canada on the Monarch of the Bermuda, and then went on to become a chartered accountant working in Calgary and Edmonton. He married and had 2 daughters, retiring at 65. He developed Parkinson's and spent 2 years at Millburn Veterans Home. He died on April 7, 1989, at 72 years of age. Ralph Llewellyn James. Ralph was born on September 21, 1922, to Ralph and Maggie James. He attended Fox School for his education. He was the driver of May, a little white horse and buggy, and that's how he got to school. He worked on the farm and helped his neighbors with their work. In 1940, At the age of 18, he joined the Army. Ralph took his training at Regina and Maple Creek, and he went to England with the Fort Garry Horse Regime from Winnipeg. He was a tank corporal. They were often blown up by mines. He saw action in Germany and Holland. At the end of the war, the troops stayed to help people rebuild their country, especially with the dikes in Holland, which the Germans had bombed. Ralph was in a convoy of trucks that were taken to Russia and left there, thousands of trucks. Ralph arrived back in Canada from New York on the Queen Elizabeth on January 15, 1946. 10,000 troops were on that ship. When they returned from war, he brought land and milked cows and farmed around the Waldeck area. On the 50th anniversary of the end of the war, he returned to Holland and visited the towns that he had helped liberate. He was married and had 3 children and passed away on January 6, 2011. Charles Lowe. Charles George Lowe was born on September 12, 1922. Charles, or also known as Charlie, was the second youngest of 7 children born to Charles Sr. Lowe and Angus Kirkshank. Charles Sr. and Angus immigrated from Scotland and settled in the Ruth Hilda district of Saskatchewan, where they farmed and raised their families. Charlie played softball for the Daisy Hill School Division, which he was proud of. He enlisted in the Army at 18 years of age and did basic training in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. While in basic training, he took up boxing, which he also enjoyed. He was assigned to the Regina Rifles in Regina Infantry Division. He served in Europe and in the Netherlands. After World War II, he returned to Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. He had family that lived there and trained to be a barber and worked in that trade for a short time. It was in Moose Jaw that he met Lila Campbell at a dance, which was very fitting, as Charlie loved to dance. Charlie and Lila married on September 11, 1948. They had 3 children, Catherine in 1949, Richard in 1952, and Lawrence in 1954 that passed away in his infancy. Very soon after their marriage, the couple moved from Moose Jaw to start a dairy farm at Cairn. Unfortunately, due to unfortunate circumstances, the dairy farm only lasted a few years. Charlie began to work at the Singer Sewing Machine Company in Moose Jaw to support his family. His career in sales had begun. In 1959, he moved the family to Swift Current. There, he and a partner opened a second-hand store called the Swap Shop. It was at that time that Charlie trained as an auctioneer. He did auctions in and around Swift Current for quite a number of years. After closing the Swap Shop, he went back to selling Singer sewing machines and doing the occasional auction as well. He did a lot of traveling, selling sewing machines throughout the area and around Swift Current. Eventually, he opened his own store, the Swift Current Sewing Center. He retired from the sewing machine business in the mid-'80s. Charlie's greatest love was his family, Kathy Lowe, Sylvester Gilbertson, and husband Lauren Gilbertson and grandchildren, Roxanne Sylvester, Hughes Giverhog, and husband Dave Giverhog, and Jeffrey Sylvester in 1975 and 2000 to 2015, and a great-grandson, Colton Hughes, who he never had the privilege to meet. His son Richard Lowe and wife Carol and grandchildren Jonathan Lowe, who also serves in the military, and Chelsea Lowe. Charlie liked to hunt, mainly for the camaraderie, they think. He loved animals, and there was many injured or orphaned animals that were brought home with him to be cared for. Their home sat on a hilltop just east of Swift Current. The road leading to their home has been called Low Road. Their home was filled with visitors, and if anyone was in need, Charlie would do anything he could to help them out. He loved people, laughter, and dancing. Children brought him so much joy, particularly his own grandchildren. If there was an exciting laughter and children at gathering, just follow the sound and there would be Charlie, doing all kinds of antics to keep them entertained. Charlie was proud to serve and proud to be a member of the Legion. He joined the Legion in 1951 in Moose Jaw and joined the Swift Current Legion in 1959 through his passing until 1993. David McQuaig. David was born on August 31st, 1950 in Rosetown. His family lived in 3 different communities in Saskatchewan prior to his graduation at Maple Creek High School in 1968. After high school, David decided to follow in his father's footsteps and join the Royal Canadian Air Force. David's father, Kenneth McQuaig, served in the Royal Canadian Air Force as a tail gunner in World War II in England. David's application to join the RCAF started at the recruitment center in Swift Current and was completed in Regina on December 2nd, 1968. David's trade in the RCAF was an instrument electrical technician. David completed his basic training at CFB Cornwallis in Nova Scotia and his trades training at CFB Clinton and CRB Borden, both in Ontario. David's first posting was at CFB Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, which was a pilot training base at the time. The aircraft that David worked with was the Tudor jet. His next posting was in CFB Shearwater in Nova Scotia, where he worked on the Tracker dual engine. This aircraft completed patrols for submarines and ships in Canadian waters. David's final posting was in CFB Edmonton in Alberta, where he was involved with single and dual engine Otter aircrafts. The aircrafts completed search and rescue missions in Western Canada and in the Northwest Territories. David completed his service with the Canadian Air Force in 1977 while stationed in Edmonton, Alberta. David and his wife Linda moved back to Saskatchewan to start their family after David completed his service in 1977. David started working for the Pioneer Elevator in Dinsmore and Simi and Crop Insurance in Rosetown and Melville before retiring in 2017 and moving to Swift Current to be closer to family. David and Linda have 2 children, Sean and Amy, and Marla and Dan, and 3 grandchildren, William, Leighton, and Laramie. Sean, Amy, and William live in Carmichael, California, a suburb of Sacramento, California, and Marla, Dan, Leighton, and Laramie live on a ranch near Morris. David, your family would like to thank you for your years of dedication and service to the Royal Canadian Air Force. Albert James Piercy. Albert James Piercy was born on September 16, 1918 in Swift Current. He was the youngest of 5 children, and most people knew him as Babe. At the age of 22, he enlisted to fight in World War II. He was sent to Ontario for basic training. When his training was completed, he was shipped overseas with the Canadian Artillery Regiment. He fought in England, France, Italy, Holland, and Germany. And at the end of the war, he was one of the Canadian soldiers to liberate Bergen, Belgium. While searching for buildings for life, he found a little girl laying underneath a deceased woman. She was barely alive. He carried her to the Red Cross truck, and he has always wondered what became of her. There are only a few memories of war that he ever spoke of. All he said is he wanted to forget what he saw and what he went through. Alex Wilkie. Alexander was born on June 22, 1896 in Scotland. In January of 1918, Alex was called to war and reported to Regina. He joined the army, and by March of 1918, he was in active service in France. He returned to work on the family farm. In 1955, he married Dorothy, and he passed on March 19, 1978. Please join me in thanking these families for putting these distinguished servicemen into our Veterans Banner program. Thank you again for joining us today. We encourage you to take a few moments to tour the museum. We are currently showing a traveling exhibit titled Enemy Aliens Internment in Canada, 1914 to 1920 in our temporary gallery. We will also be hosting a lunch and learn on November 8th from 12 to 1 with John Griffin, who will be talking to us about researching your World War II ancestors. Thank you so much again for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day.